Good evening. Welcome to our second Parent Education Night. We have partnered with Kenneth Young Center again, and tonight's topic is supporting you through social and emotional stages. And we have Camille Myers here, who is going to be helping us gather the information.
Buenas tardes a todas familias, estamos aquí de nuevamente a la segunda sesión de educación para padres. El tema de hoy es apoyando a nuestros jóvenes en las varias estaciones de socioemocionales de los jóvenes. Tenemos aquí a la señorita Camila Myers presentando hoy con nuestra asociación con el Kenneth Young Center.
Perfect. Thanks. All right. Like they said, my name is Camille Myers. I work at the Kenneth Young Center. I am the Community Collaboration Supervisor, so I oversee the substance use prevention grants as well as the Community Youth Services grants. So I look over things like Elk Grove Township, Hanover Township, that kind of stuff. We do implementation of a program called Too Good for Drugs. We do that here at Friendship as well as Holmes, Grove, and then some other middle schools in the area. So you don't have to introduce yourselves here. But like I said, my name is Camille Myers. My pronouns are she, her. Something I would like to do in this presentation is educate and hopefully help you all get a better grasp of what's going on with your students at this time. So the disclaimer here says that the views expressed in this presentation do not reflect the official policies of the Illinois Department of Human Services, the Office of Adolescent Health, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, nor does it mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Any statements expressed are the ones of me, right? Those are my opinions and based on my research, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the Office of Adolescent Health or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We also just opened our Community Collaborations Training Center. We provide professional development tailored to your individual teams, organizations, or community needs. Presentations are through racial and social justice lenses, utilizing cultural responsive research, subject matters and experts, and individuals with lived experiences to develop and deliver our products, right? And so our mission is we partner with communities to support people of all ages to navigate life's challenges through personalized prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. So we work on the non-clinical side of our division or of our agency. So we have a clinical side at Kenneth Young, and then we have a non-clinical side, which is where I work. So today's objectives are to define what social and emotional development is, to explore what social and emotional changes happen during adolescence, to define and discuss social emotional skills, and then to increase guardian knowledge and comfort of how to support students through social and emotional changes. So, social and emotional development begins in infancy and continues throughout life. This development influences a child's confidence, empathy, and the ability to develop lasting, meaningful friendships and relationships, and a sense of importance and value to those around them. So positive and nurturing early experiences and relationships have a huge impact on a child's social emotional development. And most of all development of these skills start at home, right? So we know that we see teachers doing things like social emotional learning. We see us cultivating those skills, but the most important place for students to learn is at home. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about so that you all feel more comfortable with helping cultivate those skills. So social and emotional development and skills are developing the ability to form and sustain positive relationships, experience, manage, and express emotions, explore and engage with the environment. So many of these skills occur naturally, right? We know how to interact with other people based on what we see other people do. And this can happen through modeling, like I just said, but it can also be developed through social emotional learning, which there are now like curriculums that we learn and schools that are taught in schools. So skills like goal setting, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship skills are all touched on in school. So there are a lot of other ways that these things can be modeled and encouraged other than just like through a strict curriculum. Then they can be encouraged at home. So we'll talk about that during this presentation. So according to a psychosociologist or a psychosocial psychologist named Eric Erickson, a person passes through 8 developmental stages that build upon each other. At each stage, we face a crisis, according to him. So by resolving these crises, we develop psychosocial strength or character traits that help us become confident and healthy people. There are 8 stages in his theory, and for time's sake, we're only going to be talking about 2 of them around school age and then adolescent age. It's also important to mention that since it's a theory, it's not perfect, right? But a lot of these things you'll hear and you'll be like, oh yeah, I definitely see that and I can mirror that in what I see, especially during those teen years. So for this specific presentation, we'll be focusing on stages 4 and 5, which are identity versus role confusion, that is around adolescence, and then industry versus confusion. So in stage 4, which is kind of hard to see on that screen right there, but in stage 4, the major question is, how can I be good, right? And the important events are school and sports. This is where students first start to like fly the coop, for example, right? They're starting to create those social relationships outside of home life. At this stage, it's important for both students and parents, for both teachers and parents to support and offer encouragement. However, adults should be careful not to equate achievement, right, with acceptance and love. This is the point in time where we need to make sure that we're really expressing that unconditional love and support from adult humans, so that we can help children through this stage, especially those students or those young people that might struggle with feelings of low self-esteem or inferiority. So children who are overpraised, on the other hand, might develop a sense of arrogance, right? So we need to see that balance between giving proper praise, right, when it's necessary, when it's needed, to making sure we're building self-esteem, but not overpraising where we're creating a sense of arrogance, where we're not having a real perception of how we are as human beings. So even if a child struggles in some areas of school or in some skills, encouraging kids in areas where they excel can help foster feelings of competence and achievement. So what might be an example of this? What might be an example of, even if they're struggling with something, making sure we're balancing that with praise and acceptance? I can give an example if you need. So one that I always think about is in sports, right? So a parent will go and maybe they don't do as well as you want them to in a sport. I see this all the time, right? When I was growing up, a lot of my friends were wrestlers, and I would go and I would see the matches, and they maybe didn't do as well as their parent wanted them to do, and their parent would get really upset with them, right? In that moment, it's a point where we can teach self-reflection, we can teach self-awareness, giving them not over criticism, but giving them that time for them to look at themselves and say to myself, okay, how do I feel like I did? What do I feel like I could do better? And what do I feel like I accomplished during this time, right? So those are kind of some examples of what I'm thinking, or even on test scores, right? Maybe they worked as hard as they could. They did all the things they needed to do, or maybe they didn't, right? But that's not a time for over criticism. That's a time to take a real moment of reflection where they can choose to say to themselves, okay, self, what did I do this time? What can I do better next time? And how do I feel about that, right? And then we're going to talk a little bit more about stage 5 a little bit later. We'll go a little bit more into details. So what are some examples of social emotional skills? Like I mentioned before, we talked about that self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and then responsible decision-making. So self-awareness is the ability to understand one's own emotions, right? Their emotions, thoughts, and values, and how that influences behavior across all contexts. This includes capacity to recognize your own strengths as well as your own limitations or maybe your weaknesses, right? Within a well-rounded sense of confidence and purpose. So, right, it's knowing what you're good at and also recognizing what you're not so good at, but also still having that sense of self and that sense of confidence. So self-awareness may sound like, how am I feeling and why? When am I at my best? When do I feel angry? What kind of person do I want to be today? What stresses me out? And where do I fit into my family or my community? A way that you can exercise this is using a feelings wheel. And that just like, it looks like a circle that has, in the middle, it has things like happy, sad, angry, all of those types of things, right? It has them, and then it has other words that it expands on, right? So I like to say that I think that anger is a cop-out emotion. I think that a lot of times that we say that we're feeling angry when we actually mean that we might be feeling frustrated. When we might say that we're feeling angry, but at the core of it means we're feeling lonely, right? We're feeling all of these things, and we use anger as a cop-out emotion. So I think that a feelings wheel, for example, is a good way for us to be able to examine how we're actually feeling and get to the heart of that, right? So not in every situation, you're not going to have a feelings wheel that you can slap it on the table and be like, all right, how am I feeling today, right? You're not going to have that feelings wheel with you, but being able to exercise and look through those things and have that quiet moment of reflection and modeling that to your student or to your family members or whoever, those are really moments where you can say, okay, how am I feeling today? I feel like I'm feeling angry, but what triggered that? And how am I actually feeling? I'm feeling sad because I'm feeling lonely, right? Those types of things. For students, this can be also using a dedicated time during the day to do that, right? Things like in school, having check-ins with either a friend or a teacher or another trusted adult, right? Doing those things, having those check-ins. But as a parent or a guardian, doing those things yourself and then doing those things with your student when you're noticing, asking them these questions, right? How are you feeling? When do you feel your best? Where do you think you fit in? Asking them those questions so they have a moment to think and reflect on those things. Self-management is the next topic we're going to talk about. And self-management is the ability to manage your own emotions, right? Your thoughts, behaviors effectively in different situations and achieve goals and aspirations. So this includes the capacity to delay gratification. We live in a world where everything is like, we want it now, we want it instantly, we have instant food. I'm the first person to say that I will order something on Amazon, even if I know that I can get it somewhere better, just because I know that I can get it the next morning or I can get it in 2 days, right? I don't want to wait. We don't want to wait, but that's something that we need to work on, right? That's a skill we need to cultivate, that delayed gratification, because when we have patience, it has better payoff in the long run, right? Also, managing stress, that's a huge one. Learning how to deal with when we're not feeling our best or when we're feeling overwhelmed, right? And then feeling motivation and agency to accomplish personal and collective goals. So self-management might look like impulse control, right? Again, I mentioned Amazon. I have a little bit of impulse control. I had COVID in 2020 and I did a lot of online shopping. And it started that. And I think that I'm still working on dealing with my impulse control, right? I got paid and immediately I'm on Amazon trying to figure out what I want to do, right? That is a skill that maybe I need to work on. Stress management, right? Learning how to deal with those things, maybe not using shopping as a coping mechanism when I'm feeling stressed out, right? Self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, and then organizational skills. So self-management may sound like, I need a break right now. Knowing when you need to walk away from a situation, knowing when you're feeling overwhelmed so you can say, you know what, I need to take a break so I can come back and be my most productive self. I need to come back so that I know that I will be focused after I've had this time away. I'm still working on that, right? I am not a perfect person. Just because I know the information in my brain doesn't mean that I can always execute it perfectly, right? We are always learning, growing, and trying to blossom in that moment. And also saying, may I please have some space? I'm not sure I'm ready to share, right? So those are things like, even with your student, if you're teaching them, like, as a parent, you need to walk away and say, I need some space right now from this argument. Let's come back and have a conversation later. I don't think I'm ready to share. And allowing that same space for your student, right? I know that it might feel hurtful when you hear, your child or the child that you're looking over, right? I might know it might feel painful to hear that they need space from you and they aren't ready to share. But saying and allowing them that space allows for them to have that trust, that they know that they can have that space to come and really think about how they're feeling and have a conversation with you later on. The next one is, I think I need help with, right? A huge one. A lot of people have trouble asking for help. Having those self-management skills to say, I think I need help with this, because they're aware, right? That self-awareness, like we talked about, they're aware of what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. I don't understand yet, but I will blank to reach my goal, right? Those goal setting skills. How many of us have heard of SMART goals, right? How many of us have heard of those types of things that kind of model how to set goals? And that's not to say that you need to sit down with your student, sit down with your 6th grader or your 8th grader and necessarily write out goals if that's not something that you think that you feel confident about. but also helping them go take those steps and say, okay, they're not at their goal now, but how can they get there? And what are the steps they need to take? So self-management strategy would be self-talk, right? So self-talk is the act of talking to yourself, right? So either aloud or just mentally. It's how you feel about yourself and your conscious self or your unconscious self. So generally, we tend to skew on the negative self-talk lens, right? Our brains are hardwired to remember negative things. This is a result of evolution, right? You need to remember negative things so that your fight or flight response is doing what it needs to do to keep you safe. But unfortunately, now that we are in a place where we're not being hunted, right, necessarily in the same way, we have this negative thought pattern that makes us remember these negative things. So negative self-talk makes us feel worse about ourselves, but positive self-talk can help us feel better because it triggers our problem solving, and it also helps us remind ourselves that making mistakes is part of life, right? We know that you don't need to equate a negative thing that happens to you to negative self-image, right? You don't need to say, oh, I messed this up, which means I'm a bad person, right? We need to say to ourselves, okay, self, this really stunk. I did not like that this happened, but this does not mean that I am inherently a bad person. This means that I need to find steps to do what I can do to be better next time. So if anybody has heard of positive affirmations, these are things that we can utilize to practice positive self-talk, right? So if you think, for example, when I was in school, I was really bad at math. And it was really hard for me to understand because I was an AP student. I was good at other things. I was good at writing, good at reading. I was good at all those things, but math was not it for me. So an affirmation I could have used is, I'm smart and I'm capable, right? So I wake up in the morning, I look at myself and I say, I'm smart and I'm capable. I'm brushing my teeth, I'm smart and I'm capable. I'm going through my day, I'm smart and I'm capable. I'm freaking out in math, I'm smart and I'm capable, right? Repeating that to yourself over and over again, those things are the way that you can convince yourself, right, that those things are true about yourself. In the same way that if you continually talk negatively about yourself, you will believe those negative things about yourself. Oh, and also modeling that for your student, right? If you talk poorly about yourself, your student, you might not even be talking about your student or your youth, but if you talk negatively about yourself and they think that they might align with that, they're going to learn that they need to think about their self in the same way that you think about yourself. So think about the way you talk about yourself out loud, the way you treat yourself, the way you're unkind to yourself, and say, okay, self, how can I rewire that? How can I change that behavior? How can I change the way that I think about myself? Even if I don't believe it, my student will believe it about themselves, right? My youth will believe it about themselves. Social awareness is the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the ability to understand the perspectives and empathize with others, right? So essentially, this is having empathy and compassion for others and understanding the overall setting and recognizing family, school, and community resources for support. At home, this may look like, I wonder how that made blank feel, right? How would it feel if I were in that situation? What is blank thinking? They seem sad right now. Maybe I should blank. And thanks for sharing. My family does it this way, or my friend does it this way, or I learned it this way, right? So at home, this could look like practicing active listening skills and expressing empathy in difficult situations, even if you think that the situation is not that big of a deal, right? I know that sometimes, especially in middle school, which we'll talk about this in a little bit, some things that they might think are huge, you're like, why are you freaking out about that? It is literally not a big deal. But expressing that empathy and listening, using your good active listening skills, that opens a window for them to learn those social awareness skills and also for them to feel heard and supported. And I think this is the last skill we're going to talk about, which is relationship skills. It's the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships, and also to effectively navigate settings of diverse people, as well as negotiate conflict, right? That conflict management in places where there are differences in personality, also provide leadership and help and asking for help when needed. So relationship skills may sound like, when you blank, it made me feel blank, which I would like to change to say, when this happens, I feel this way, right? Using those I statements instead of saying, when you do this, it makes me feel this way, saying, when this happens, I feel this way. So you're putting the onus on yourself, right? You're putting the way that you feel, it's about you. It's not you making it, oh, you make me feel this way, right? Asking, can you explain what you mean by that? Well, there might be a misunderstanding. I disagree with you because blank, right? It's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to have conflict. I always tell my 8th graders that when there's more than one person in a situation and there are more than one brain in a room, there is likelihood that there will be conflict, and that is okay. Conflict is healthy as long as we know how to manage it in a way that is effective and productive, right? And then the last thing is, what did you mean by blank, right? Getting that clarification. So you can encourage healthy relationships by modeling at home, right? When you have conflict with your partner, when you have conflict with your student, when you have conflict with another person, modeling those healthy resolution skills and encouraging healthy friendships, and also giving them some allowances for autonomy when connecting with other peers, right? A way that you could practice this would be using a rosebud thorn approach, which I know seems very structured, right, to do at home. This is something that you might use in the classroom or in a small group. But this strategy really is just asking them, what is something positive that happened to you this week? What is something that you're looking forward to next week? And then what is something that you need help with, right? So this can just come up organically, a normal conversation. If you're at home, as you walk through the house, when you're making dinner, when you're having dinner, asking these questions so that you're really getting to know what's going on underneath. And letting them have the time to talk to you about the things that are real, not just homework and not just activities, real conversation, right? Meaningful conversation. And I lied before. This is the last one. Responsible decision making. It's the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across all types of situations, right? So this might look like identifying problems, analyzing situations, solving problems, evaluating, reflecting, and ethical responsibility, right? So it's the ability to advocate for others. It's the ability to think about their values and their morals and say, okay, does this choice match up with what I believe to be true, match up to what I believe to be good or right or just, right? It's that making a choice that will help them in the long run, or that really aligns with what they believe about themselves and about the world. So you can utilize these specific strategies like SMART goals, like I mentioned before, and there's also something called the Pooch protocol, which I just learned about. But more simply, you can also just walk through these types of situations with your student to help them make step-by-step good decisions, right? So you can ask them, how will this impact others? How will this impact yourself, right? Is this worth it? Why do you want to make this choice? Was it a strong choice? And again, will it help me get to where I want to be? So this is where stage 5 of Erikson's theory comes in, the identity versus role confusion. So according to Erikson, the major question that youth in the teenage years will be facing is, who am I, right? And so the major events related are social relationships. Identity involves the experiences, relationships, beliefs, values, and memories that make up a person's sense of self. This helps create a continuous self-image that remains fairly constant even as new aspects are developed or strengthened over time. So identity provides the following: self-sameness, so you're the same across all boards, right? In every interaction, more or less, you are the same person. You don't feel like you need to be a chameleon. You don't feel like you need to shift, right? You feel like you can just be your authentic self for the most part, right? We all know that in professional settings, things might need to change, but for the most part, you are who you are across all boards. Uniqueness as well, a frame to differentiate between yourself and between other people, right? Knowing that you are just you, and there is not another person like you anywhere else to exist. And the last one is psychosocial development. So that's physical and mental well-being for adolescents. So during this stage, the conflict that is entered is personal identity, right? Like we said, successfully completing this leads to a strong sense of self. So when we talk about role confusion, what we mean is that kids who are not allowed to explore and test out different identities might be left with, like I said, role confusion. So this can be like being unsure of where you fit in and where you belong, drifting from one relationship or friend group or job to another, and then feeling disappointed about your place or confused about your place in life. So some of the things that change are identity, right? Like I said, they're trying to figure out who they are, the things they like, trying on different clothes, music, art, friend groups, family, friends, and media and culture are some of the things that might influence that. Right? So we all maybe we've all heard the it's not a phase, mom situation, but it is a phase, and that's okay. They're trying to put on different hats, figure out where they fit, right? The next one is independence will change. They'll probably want to be more independent around adolescence. They want to be a little bit more in charge of how they'll get around and where they're able to go, how they'll spend their time and who they're with and what they spend their money on if they have an allowance or they have a little babysitting job or something. As your child becomes more independent, it probably means some changes in your family routine might happen because they want that independence, right? The next thing is responsibility. So your child might be looking to take on more responsibility at home or at school. So this could include things like making dinner either for themselves or for the family at least once a week, or even being on the school's student council. So for example, where I work at the Kenneth Young Center, we have 2 youth advisory councils, one at Elk Grove High School and one serving District 211, which is in the Schaumburg area. We have those 2 things that give students a chance for leadership. So maybe if your student is looking for that sense of responsibility, joining a student council or joining a youth advisory council would be a good option for them, right? The next thing is experiences, new experiences. They're more than likely trying to look for that outlet. And a lot of times this is where risky experiences come in, right? This is where substance use comes in. This is where them learning more about sex and all those types of things comes in, which is why it's important that having that open line of communication and explaining to them, okay, does this align with what you see for yourself? Does this align with your goal? We can encourage healthy risk, things like trying new foods, things like trying new places to hang out that are safe, right? Instead of going to the mall all the time, maybe we go skating one night, doing things that are new experiences, going on roller coasters, right? Going to Six Flags, doing things that are fun and age appropriate, and encouraging them to do those new things will also eliminate or prevent some of that risk of them doing things that they more than likely will be getting them into a little bit of trouble. Another thing that will change is values. So this is the time where your child will start to develop a stronger sense of values and morals, and they might be questioning things more. So your words and actions will help shape your child's sense of morality, of what's right and what's wrong. The next thing is influences. So friends and peers are probably going to start influencing your child a lot more, especially about their behavior, their appearance, their interests, and then their sense of self and self-esteem. So you still have a huge influence on long-term things like career choices, values, and morals. But this is a time where their influences, like for example, what they want to wear, will probably be influenced by the people they're around most often, which are their peers. So this could be a good time to have that conversation about, okay, let me help you figure out what you really like and not the things that you are being peer pressured into liking, right? Having those open conversations about those types of things. The next one is sexual identity. So your child might start to have romantic feelings or romantic relationships and go out on dates. They're super excited to hold hands with Johnny down the street for 3 whole seconds, right? They're so excited at this time. But this doesn't always mean that they're super intimate relationships, but they might just be trying to figure it out. So for some people, this might happen later on in life, but this is an important time to be having those conversations about how do you feel, and having those moments where they can open up and showing that they can trust you and all of those types of things. The next and last thing on this slide is media will be a huge influence, right? We live in a super digital age. We all know that the kids have TikTok and they have Snapchat and they have whatever else they use, right? So this might influence how your child communicates with friends and learns about the world and also how they feel about themselves. So there are also many risks as well as benefits to that ability to be on media all the time. So talking to your child is the best way to protect them, and making sure that you talk to them about internet safety and making sure that you have those conversations. And if you don't know, there are definitely people within your community who can connect you to the resources so that you know what are the laws, what are the things that might be suspicious, right? So we can talk about those types of things. Some of the emotional changes. All right, so this is where like typical teen angst comes in. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, which is happening during the teen years. So, right, we all know moods and feelings, those things are changing, right? Your child might show strong feelings and intense emotions, and their mood might seem unpredictable. These ups and downs happen because your child's brain is still learning how to control and express emotions in an adult way, right? If you think that sometimes it's hard for you to manage your emotions, just think of how somebody who's the front part of their brain, the part that helps you make decisions, is not all the way developed, right? They're learning. They're still learning. So having that patience to understand that there will be a fluctuation in their mood. If you think it's annoying that their mood is changing, right? Imagine how they feel. The next thing is sensitivity to others. So as your child gets older, they'll get better at understanding people's emotions. But right now, it's kind of easy to misread facial expressions, body language, and misinterpret those things. So they might need some help working that out or having that conversation if they do misunderstand, and understanding that intent isn't always impact, right? So if they get upset about something that you say, and they think, and you think that, oh, you didn't mean it that way, oh, that was not my intention, just know that your intent does not always match your impact. And that's a time to have a conversation about, okay, here's how we misunderstood. What can we do to make it okay? What can we do to remedy that? The next one is that they are self-conscious at age, right? So teenage self-esteem often affects how teenagers think about how they look. They might feel self-conscious about their physical appearance, and they also might compare their bodies to those of their friends or their peers or the people they say on social media. So this is why, and we'll talk about this a little later, it is super important to not attribute their physical features to their self-worth. It's important that we don't even talk about it. We talk about what has merit outside of how they physically look, because they're already super aware of it. They're already self-conscious about it. They already know that they don't look like their friend, or that they do look like their friend, or whatever the case might be, right? So having that conversation about things outside of their physical body that makes them good and that makes them awesome. And the last one is decision making. So your child might go through a stage where they seem to act without thinking, right? That impulse control. Your decision making skills are still developing at this age, and they're still learning that their actions have consequences, right? So having those conversations and helping them bridge that gap between the things that they do and the things that the way that they feel, right? All those types of things. Changes in relationships, right? Like I said, their friends are becoming more important at this age. And so they might want to spend more time with their friends and less time with the family. The next thing is that they might be having more arguments with their parent or guardian, right? And that's because they're seeking that independence. They're starting to think more abstractly. They're starting to question viewpoints. They're not necessarily questioning you, but they are questioning, why do you think that way? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for the world, right? On the top of this, they might be upset. They might upset people without meaning to, right? Because they don't always understand the consequences of their actions, right? And then this is where utilizing good conflict management will come in to a benefit for both you and your student. And the last one, right, goes hand in hand, is that they'll start seeing things a little bit differently than you. And that's fine, right? As long as you've been instilling those morals, those things that you think are concrete to their development, right? These are times where they might be changing some of the things that they believe about you. And it's okay, like, right? I'm sure that many of us have friends that we love unconditionally that have different opinions than we do, or that have different interests or different likes than we do. And it's totally okay. We still need to be giving that unconditional love to our students, regardless if they, can sometimes be difficult. So some of the consequences of having a lack of identity, we're talking about emotional challenges for teens. So some of the consequences of having a lack of identity are difficulties with commitment, right? They might bounce around from friend group to friend group. They might bounce around from activity to activity. And when they're older, relationship to relationship or job to job. They might have a weak sense of self, lack of confidence, and then worse mental health and well-being, right? So it's important to note that at this age, there's increased risk of poor mental health as well as increased risk for substance misuse or substance use. So the average onset of many mental health disorders is around 14 and a half. So this might be because of a stronger emotional response in adolescence or motivations or difficulty balancing emotions and behaviors, but also generally, this is when the onset of mental health issues start to happen. And this is not to say that this is something as a parent that you should be ashamed of. I know that my parents did the best they could. They were awesome parents. They're lovely human beings. But the onset of some of my mental health issues started around age 13, right? And now as a 24-year-old, that has nothing to do with my parents anymore, right? That has nothing to do with them. But all I know is that they supported me and they helped me get to a place where I felt like I was okay. So if you feel like your student is struggling with things more than just normal teen angst, it's important for you to talk to your school's resources. There are plenty of them, as well as maybe a general practitioner, or you can always reach out to the Kenneth Young Center and we can connect you with any local resources. So, what can we do as adults, parents, or caregivers to support teenagers during this time where everything is changing and some things are a little bit more challenging? The first one is to be a role model, right? Like I've said throughout this whole presentation, is to model behavior with the way that you interact with your partners, your colleagues, your friends, your other family members. Model that behavior. They will learn from you how to be a good person, right? They will learn from you from your behavior. So if you are modeling proper or healthy conflict management, they're also going to learn that. But if you're doing the opposite, they're also going to learn that too, right? I love the idea that like kids are sponges at this age. They just absorb. So we just need to make sure that we know how to be that role model. And also saying when we mess up, because we will, because we are human as well, coming back and having that moment of saying, okay, I handled this in a way that was less than stellar. What can we do next time, right? Having that moment of self-reflection. The next thing is to get to know your child's friends, right? So getting to know them is making a welcome place for them to be, because you know that that's the person that's influencing your child's behavior. That's the person that they're spending all their time with. And also, like, they're around your student's age, so maybe you are going to be a good influence on them just as much as you hope that they're a good influence on your student. If you're concerned about a child's friends, you might be able to guide them towards other social groups, and you might be able to influence their behavior just based on that foundation of trust. But I would not recommend banning friendships or criticizing your child's friends too much, because that could have the opposite effect and they'll end up hiding things from you and trying to do those things behind your back even if you're not there, right? So making sure that that foundation of trust is there and having open conversation of, okay, like, what do you like about this friend? What can you maybe gain from doing XYZ over here, right? Having those conversations. The next thing is to listen to your child's feelings. Active listening can be a powerful way of strengthening your relationship over the years. Even now, right, as an adult, I will come to my parents and hopefully they'll be using those active listening skills so I can be a heard speaker and they can be an empathetic listener, right? It gives them an opportunity to trust you more, and you will learn more about your student and you will be able to gain that relationship. Being open about your own feelings, right? When you're not feeling your best, when you're feeling really great, when you notice something that you love about your student, tell them those things, right? When you're not feeling your best, it helps them to know that like adult people also are just people at the end of the day, right? Having those conversations. And also when they do something that you really love, as opposed to nitpicking the things that they don't do well, saying things like, I feel really happy that you invited me to your school's performance, or I feel really happy when you put the dishes away without me asking you, right? Focusing on that positive. And then talking about relationships and sexuality. So if you talk about relationships and you open that bridge to trust, you will know the decisions that they're making ahead of time, right? You'll know those things. You'll be able to correct misinformation because there's tons of it out there, but you will be the first line of defense so that they are making healthy decisions, right? And you should a couple topics, sorry, not you should, but there are a couple topics to really touch upon things like consent, things like sexting and pornography around this age, right? Those types of things are really important to touch upon just because those are real world things that are happening. And if they don't learn about how to be safe from you, it might be difficult if problems do arise, or if they hear it at school for the first time or from other students or on the internet. And let your child know that you're always available to talk about questions or concerns. And again, if you ever have questions, Kenneth Young Center can always point you in the right direction in terms of resources and what you might do. The next thing is to focus on the positive, right? Like I mentioned before, praising your student for being a good friend, having a variety of interests, trying very hard, right? We need that positive reinforcement as opposed to negative reinforcement, right? Those things where giving them positive praise will stick with them because our brains are already hardwired to remember the negative, right? They need more of that flooding of positive reinforcement. And the last one is to focus on the non-physical. I touched upon this a little bit earlier, is that teenagers are already self-conscious and they're anxious about their bodies and appearance because it's changing, and you might look different than the person that you're changed next to in the locker room. So reinforce positive aspects of your child's social and emotional development. Things like, you are so smart. Things like, you are so funny. You have a big heart. I love the way you do blank, right? Those types of things that are concrete and have nothing to do with their physical appearance. It will help them know who they are and not judge themselves based on what they look like or what they look like in the mirror. All right. So your active listening skills, we'll go through these pretty quickly. Active listening is one of the things that we can do to have a stronger relationship building moment. So paying attention, right? Paying attention to body language, not cutting people off, paying attention to your own body language as well as somebody else's, making that eye contact, shaking your head yes, right? When you hear what they're saying. The next thing is to withhold judgment, right? Withhold jumping in and giving your opinion while the speaker is talking. When you're practicing active listening, you can be open-minded and listening to new ideas and holding any criticism until it is your turn to talk, to be the speaker. The next thing is reflecting, which is a skill that you basically do when you mirror what they say in their emotions, right? So they say whatever the case may be, they say whatever the situation is, and you say to them, so what I'm hearing you say is blank, right? You're reflecting what they said. And you're periodically paraphrasing what they just said so that they know that you're listening and that you actually are hearing what they say, not just going, right? And the next thing is clarifying, right? So asking clarifying questions like, what do you think about blank? Or can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or will you further explain what you just said, blank, right? So asking those questions so that if you do misunderstand something, you can get that clarification so that you really understand before you respond. And then the next thing is summarizing, right? So at the end of the speaker speaking, you can say, okay, so what I heard from you is that you said blank, right? And you can say all of the key themes that you heard throughout the time that they were talking. And then it will be your turn to share, right? You can offer any insight that you might have. You can offer any advice, even a personal anecdote about whatever the thing is related to what they were talking about. And those are the couple of things that you can do to be a better active listener. So this would be the time for questions. Ta-da! If there are not questions or we're not doing it on the live stream, then we can move on. But that's this portion. Any questions, comments, concerns?
So for the active listening,
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is something that you've experienced like at home and you've dealt with, and because of that you're able to then teach it to parents?
This is something that I actually learned in a counseling class, as well as I learn now that I'm older how to have better communication, because it's not that my parents didn't like actively do active listening skills, but it's more that it wasn't something that was ever, I don't think ever talked about, right? We never talked about the fact that like they're actively listening to me. And of course they did things like paying attention when I'm talking, right? But it was a thing where they would interject, right? So learning the things not to do versus learning the things to do correctly, or like how to make me actually feel heard, right? I think that those are kind of, I learned later on, but I'm hoping to impart now so that people don't have to wait until they're in their 20s, to feel like they've been heard before. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what's the difference between reflecting and clarifying?
Yes. So reflecting basically is saying what you hear. So if someone says something like, Emma's so loyal, you say something like, okay, so Emma is great with these skills, but you want her to increase blank, right? So if you say what your problem is with Emma and you say it in a long-winded way, the way you reflect is by paraphrasing what you just heard them say, so that you know that you have so that you know that you're hearing what they said. And then if you don't understand, right, that's when that clarifying would come in. So when you think that you know what they said, you say, okay, so what I'm hearing is blank. And they would say, yeah. Or if they said, no, that's not what I said at all, you would say, okay, so can you tell me more about that? And that's where that clarifying comes in. Is that good? Cool. Any other questions or comments? Cool. All right. So here are our sources. I don't know why the last two ones are highlighted, but they are. Some of the ones that I really enjoy. It's very well mined. They always give me some good information. A lot of psychology people write articles and put them on there. And then Australia always does a really nice job of giving good resources. So that Raising Children up there is an Australian website, but they have a lot of good information. That's me again. So again, my name is Camille Myers. I work at the Kenneth Young Center. My email's up there. It's just camillem@kennethyoung.org. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or any feedback about this presentation, feel free to send it my way. I will respond in a timely manner, hopefully. And our Community Collaboration Training Center, like I said, we do all of these things. We provide all these trainings. And if you're interested in any of those things, we have Narcan training, mental health first aid training, which I really, really suggest. I think it's awesome. It teaches you how to basically like do CPR type things, but for mental health. We also have CPR training, an LGBTQ plus 101, a working with LGBTQ youth, a Bassett training, trauma-informed care, prevention and recovery training, as well as responsible gaming training. So our division director, Shireen Payton's email is up there, as well as our manager of training and professional development, Marianne Rogensky. So if you're interested in that, their emails are up there as well. And I thank you for being at this presentation tonight.